she was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you indeed look on the afflictions of your servant, and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. Then the woman sent her away and ate, and her face was no longer sad. It is Wednesday, the 14th day of June, 2023, and it's time to open up the devotional book, Truth for Life, by Pastor Alistair Begg, and read the section that's for today, this 14th day of June, which is entitled, The Weight of Grief. That's The Weight of Grief. And the verses today, 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 10 and 11, as well as verse 18. And it reads, She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you indeed look on the afflictions of your servant, and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. Then the woman sent her away and ate, and her face was no longer sad. That's 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 10 through 11, and verse 18. Alistair Begg writes, When we cannot see the way forward in life, we must look up to our God. This is what Hannah did. Her childlessness meant she bore the weight of grief, which was compounded by being provoked by Peninnah, her husband's second wife, who has given birth to many children, 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 4 and 6, and by her husband's insensitive and thoughtless questions, verse 8. When you are facing trial of grief, Hannah serves as an example, first to what she did not do. She did not become resentful towards God, nor did she seek vengeance against her rival, Peninnah. Instead, she removed herself from the environment that provoked her sense of disappointment and placed herself in the presence of the one who holds the answers. She brought her tears, her sighs, her longings, all expressions of her sad heart, before God. As Hannah prayed, she was so attempted to induce God's favor with a promise. Hannah recognized God as majestic and sovereign, and herself as his servant. She simply asked God to do for her what he has done for his people in the past. After Hannah brought her grief to the Lord, but before her prayer was answered, her appetite returned and her countenance changed. In other words, the resolution for Hannah was not in her pregnancy or in the subsequent arrival of a child, but in the fact that she had cast her anxieties on the Lord. That was what settled her spirit and lightened her steps. Psalm 73 recounts the difficulties the psalmist faced, which caused him nearly to lose his faith. He knew God was good and looked after his people, but his experience seemed to differ. That all changed, though, when he came before God in his desperation. When I sought how to understand this, it seemed to me a wearisome task, until I went into the sanctuary of God. That's Psalm 73, verse 16 and 17. For both Hannah and the psalmist, peace and understanding came as they brought their griefs and troubles into the sanctuary, into the very presence of God himself. When you encounter difficult situations that provoke you and test your belief in God's goodness, where do you go? Do you submerge yourself beneath your troubles? Or do you enter the sanctuary of God's presence in prayer? When you face distress, cry out to God, in whose presence you stand because of the finished work of Christ. As you remember that he is sovereign and good and acts on behalf of his people, you will pray with confidence and boldness and experience the peace that comes only from above, even before you see how he will answer your prayer. A great reminder, especially for those of us carrying great burdens of grief today, go into the presence of the Lord. Find yourself acknowledging God and His goodness and just spending time with Him. He might not change the situation right away, but you know what? He's going to change you in the midst of the situation. May you find His peace in His presence today. And that concludes the reading of our devotional thought for this 14th day of June 2023. And those of you reading through the Bible in a year, Jeremiah chapter 25 and 26, as well as Matthew's Gospel chapter 25, verses 1 through 30, Clive Walsh here, asking God's richest blessings upon you this very day.